Hi, I'm Skip Elsheimer. Thanks for joining me for this impromptu screening. I'm striving to do a Friday lunch-ish screening. What time is it? 1:30-ish. Every Friday this summer as an opportunity to bust out some films that we haven't seen before here at AV Geeks, and we have a lot of films. We have 25,000, and that collection grows all the time, and sometimes we have stuff that we just haven't watched yet, and so opportunity to come up with some micro themes or just randomly pull some stuff. I'm going to take these glasses off because I can see the glare of the computer in them. Anyhow, so yesterday, June 6th, not only is it a bunch of my friends' birthdays, but also it was D-Day, and so I have a film queued up. Literally, we're going to watch film. And this film is about D-Day, and it's funny, it was actually licensed and distributed through different courses, so it actually was made for television by David L. Whopper's production company, and produced and directed by Mel Stewart. There might be a trivia question related to Mel Stewart at the end of this film. And then it was picked up by Encyclopedia Britannica, and then it was distributed by Film Incorporated. So I'm not sure, this seems like this has a long history, but there's some beautiful footage in here, and it kind of sets the tone for how immense and the crazy sacrifices that were made for D-Day. And it was a turning point, of course, and they'll talk about that. And then I have another film called 6th of June, which I have never seen, that I got from a local university. And it looks like it's raw material shot for a student film, but I haven't watched it, so that's what we'll probably spend the second part of this screening watching. No guarantees whatsoever. It's silent, so I'm sure that's going to raise some hackles for some people, but thanks so much, everybody, for joining. Again, impromptu, but if you like what you saw, Patreon, go to avgeeks.com, buy some DVDs, or tell people about it. This is actually the best thing you can do, is just share what we're doing, because we're trying to watch as many films and show you as many films as we can. So here is D-Day.
London, spring 1944. 2 million soldiers of the Allied nations wait on the eve of a great battle. Wait for the command of one man who is to make a crucial decision which will alter the course of world history. The man is General Dwight D. Eisenhower. The decision, D-Day. At Tehran in November 1943, the most important political meeting since the Versailles Treaty brings together Stalin, Roosevelt, and Churchill for the first time since the start of World War II. Their prime objective is to set a date for the invasion of Nazi-held Western Europe. There is, however, a clash of opinions on strategy. Stalin demands an invasion through France to relieve pressure on the Russian front. Churchill argues instead for strengthening and extending the present campaign in the Mediterranean. Roosevelt settles the debate by voting for the invasion through France. The first week of May 1944 is set as the target date. A week later in Tunis, North Africa, Roosevelt designates General Dwight Eisenhower supreme commander of the new Allied Expeditionary Force. Eisenhower's orders are simple and direct. You will enter the continent of Europe and undertake operations aimed at the heart of Germany and the destruction of her armed forces. That same month in Berlin, Adolf Hitler summons Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, the legendary Desert Fox, to prepare German defenses against the expected Allied invasion. Rommel will be the field commander, but on the day of the invasion, Hitler intends to direct the strategy against the Allies himself. Rommel's first mission for Hitler is to inspect the Atlantic Wall, the highly publicized line of defense fortifications along the coast of Western Europe. He is appalled by what he sees. The defenses are shockingly inadequate and in many places non-existent. He calls the wall a gigantic fake, a paper hoop for the Allies to jump through. Rommel warns that if the Allies are not stopped at the water's edge during the first 24 hours of battle, the war will be lost. Rommel convinces Hitler the beaches will be the main line of resistance and that the Atlantic Wall must be reinforced in a furious race against time. The invasion might come at any point on the 3,000 miles of coastline from Norway to Spain. But Hitler knows that the most likely invasion points are in France. One in Normandy, close to Cherbourg and Le Havre. The other at Calais, only 20 miles from England. Engineering battalions, combat troops, slave laborers. 500,000 men are pressed into service to build an impregnable Atlantic wall that will hurl the enemy back into the sea. All through the spring of 1944, at Supreme Headquarters in London, plans proceed for Operation Overlord, the secret code name for the invasion of France. Assisting Eisenhower are his 3 top invasion commanders. British Chief Air Marshal Trafford Leigh-Mallory, who will command the Air Forces, Admiral Bertram Ramsay of the Royal Navy, who will be the Naval Chief, and British General Bernard Montgomery, the famous Monty who defeated Rommel in North Africa, will command the ground forces. A new date is set. The invasion will take place in the first week of June. Southern England now becomes a vast arsenal, the greatest in military history. The massive concentration of men and machines is the subject of a joke in every British pub. England, they say, would sink into the sea if it weren't for the barrage balloons holding her up. On April 30th, 1944, all of southern England is suddenly sealed off from the rest of the world. The war's most important secret, the time and place of D-Day, must be kept from the enemy. One place in England where security measures are intentionally relaxed is at General George Patton's headquarters, 20 miles across the Channel from Calais. Here at Dover, the flamboyant Patton commands a mythical army comprised of dummy tanks, dummy trucks, and even a mock invasion fleet. Patton, the general most feared by the Germans, stages noisy, highly conspicuous maneuvers in order to make the Germans believe that the invasion will come at Calais. Although Hitler is now convinced that Calais, only 20 miles from England, is the invasion target. Hitler immediately orders panzer units and infantry divisions brought up to strengthen the Calais district. By June, there will be more than 150,000 men ready in Calais to repel the great Allied invasion. Rommel's first line of defense is 100,000 mines planted in the Channel, backed up by 4 million more buried along the beaches. Rommel has utilized every diabolical mechanical device imaginable to block the invasion. And if the Allies get past the beaches, behind the guns and behind the obstacles are the battle-hardened soldiers and panzer units of the mighty German Wehrmacht, ready to drive them back into the sea. Fields are flooded beyond the beach to drown paratroopers in the event of airborne landings. Hitler, however, puts his ultimate faith in his newly developed secret vengeance weapons, the V-1 robot bomb and the V-2 supersonic rocket. He hopes he can perfect and launch enough of these in time. If so, he is confident he can destroy any Allied invasion force. Early in May, Eisenhower and his commanders finalized the major invasion plan. Provided the weather is right, June 5th, 6th, or 7th will be D-Day. Only on those days in June will conditions be ideal for invasion. A full moon to light the way for the airborne troops, and a low morning tide for the landing operations. Primary objective of the invasion is to secure a beachhead in Normandy, then capture the port of Cherbourg. In the first hours of D-Day, paratroopers will drop behind coastal defenses to isolate the beaches. Meanwhile, 5,000 ships carrying the main assault forces will rendezvous in mid-channel to await H hour. At 6:30 a.m., small landing craft will take the troops to the 5 invasion beaches. The Americans will land at Utah and Omaha. The British and Canadians at Gold, Juno, and Sword. Phase 1 begins. The Air Force bombs enemy roads, railways, and airfields. By D-Day, only about 200 German planes are left in the West. All transportation is virtually at a standstill, and the Luftwaffe is incapable of giving any air support. It is June 3rd. Now the spring is coiled. The weather is good. The men are ready. D-Day will be June 5th. Eisenhower gives the command to go. For the men, the waiting is over. The march to the sea begins. First ships are on their way to their rendezvous in the Channel when they're hit by unexpected storms. Weather, the one element beyond the control of the Allied High Command, threatens the success of the invasion. Tiny landing craft would be swamped by the heavy seas. Ike refuses to risk disaster and postpones D-Day for at least 24 hours. The advance convoys of the fleet, already en route to invasion, are ordered back. German weather stations track the storm, and their forecasters make the same prediction as the Allied meteorologists. The worst storm in 20 years is approaching the English Channel, and the weather will continue bad for at least a week. Lulled into a sense of security, the German Navy cancels mine-laying operations and its nightly E-boat patrols. All planes are grounded. Rommel estimates that an Allied invasion is not possible during the next 2 weeks. Exhausted from overwork, he decides to go home to Germany for a few days' rest. Besides, Tuesday, June 6th, will be his wife's birthday. In England, at the embarkation ports, The Allied forces are confined to their ships. As the men wait, Eisenhower faces another tortured decision. If the bad weather continues, the invasion will have to be put off until June 19th, when the tide will be right again. And if he does postpone, how can he keep the invasion secrets locked up among 250,000 men? How will the long delay affect their morale? The storm at sea now moves inland, striking southern England with its full fury. The situation looks more hopeless than ever. The Allied weather stations report from far out in the North Atlantic, from Greenland, from places where German meteorologists cannot get information. They predict the possibility that the storm front may lift for a 24-hour period on Tuesday, June 6th, and the news is relayed to Eisenhower's headquarters. Now, at an old English mansion near the invasion harbor of Portsmouth, a dramatic conference takes place. Eisenhower and his commanders meet to consider whether they should launch the invasion on Tuesday. The opinions are divided, some doubtful, some yes. But the final word, the fateful decision, must come from Eisenhower. There is a moment of silence, then he says, "Okay, let's go. D-Day will be Tuesday, June 6th. From Plymouth and Dartmouth, from Spithead and Falmouth, from Brixham and Yarmouth, from Tor Bay and Portsmouth, they come. Battleships, minesweepers, destroyers, rocket barges, tugboats, and landing craft. 5,000 vessels in all. The greatest invasion armada in the history of man. Meanwhile, at Hitler's luxurious mountain retreat at Berchtesgaden, the Fuhrer enjoys a peaceful day with his mistress, Eva Braun. He will hold 2 military conferences with his staff and spend the late hours of the evening listening to Wagner. Along the Atlantic wall, there's nothing unusual to report. All is quiet on the Western Front. The airborne phase of Operation Overlord begins. From a dozen British airfields on the night of June 5th, 1,000 planes will take off for France before midnight. They will carry 18,000 paratroopers. 5 hours before the seaborne invasions, this advance army of paratroopers will drop behind the Atlantic wall to soften the enemy defenses and block off reinforcements. Ike watches the last of the airborne pass over. The long, weary months of planning and preparation are over. It is reported that there are tears in his eyes. It is now 12:01 a.m., June 6th, D-Day. In the English Channel, the fleet slowly approaches France. The Navy has already cleared paths through Rommel's minefields. For the men aboard the transports and the men flying overhead, this day will be one they will always remember. But for some, it will be their last day on Earth. The first invaders to touch French soil are the Pathfinders. Their mission is to light the drop zones for the airborne troops to follow. An hour later, the main force of the paratroopers arrives over France. The Germans sound the alarm. Clouds and heavy anti-aircraft fire throw the planes off course, and paratroopers are dropped miles from scheduled zones. Some land in the ocean, in the rivers, or in the fields Rommel has flooded, and drown under the weight of 70 pounds of equipment. The widely separated men meet only light resistance from the confused German troops. Everything is quiet on the beaches of Normandy. In spite of paratroop landings behind the beaches, German headquarters regard the action as merely diversionary. They still believe the invasion will come at Calais. 12 miles out, the Allied fleet transfers the men to small landing craft. It is no longer the war of generals and admirals. It is now the war of the men. The beach commanders call for reinforcements. 2 crack armored units under Hitler's control are only 100 miles away. But General Jodl, Hitler's chief of operations, refuses to disturb the Fuhrer. The tank divisions, he says, are being saved for the main landings at Calais. Meanwhile, he suggests they clean up the minor operation at Normandy with the forces at hand. It's now 10 minutes to 6. As the first waves of men head for the shore, the Navy's giant guns begin to open fire on Rommel's coastal batteries and beach emplacements. The ships knock out 50% of the German defenses. At the same time, Air Force bombers sweep across the channel to aid the Navy in destroying the German beach fortifications. But the sky is overcast. In order to avoid the risk of hitting the approaching landing craft, the bombardiers are ordered to delay their releases for several seconds. Because of this, the bombs fall from 300 yards to 3 miles back from the coast. And so the first wave of men rush toward Omaha Beach, unaware that Rommel's Atlantic wall still bristles with deadly firepower. Cross this beach and on their way inland by lunch. Omaha Beach, D-Day. Omaha Beach is a disaster. In the confused nightmare of sudden death, the few survivors are pinned up against the cliffs by a shower of enemy crossfire. Bewildered by landings on the wrong beaches and shocked by the suffering and death around them, the men on bloody Omaha desperately begin to regroup. Frantic calls for fire support are sent to destroyers lying offshore. Finally, the beach is secured, and succeeding waves of men pour onto Omaha. Commanders who were ready to write off Omaha as a total failure now say the victory is a miracle. At the British beaches of Gold and Juneau, the first waves meet heavy resistance, but within hours, the beaches are secure. At Utah Beach, at Sword Beach, the Allies break through light opposition, and by noon, the entire invasion force is moving forward, inland. They advance to link up with the airborne forces still fighting in the interior. The Germans desperately try to halt further advances, hoping to prevent consolidation of the various Allied assault forces. For the Germans, the battle is not yet lost. The German General Staff now recognizes the extreme danger of the situation. The two crack panzer divisions assigned to Calais by Hitler must be rushed to Normandy immediately. A desperate call is put into the Fuhrer. Although far removed from the battle, Hitler will not allow his generals to dictate strategy to him. He orders his aides to inform Rundstedt that the situation at Normandy does not require the transfer of the two panzer divisions. He is saving them, along with his entire 15th Army, for Calais, where he feels the real invasion is sure to come. He then retires to take a nap. Rommel, the one man who might persuade him to change his mind, is in a car racing back to the front. And so while Hitler sleeps at Berchtesgaden, his fatal blunder prevents an immediate major counterattack. It allows the Allies to land more men and supplies on the hard-won shores of Normandy. Rommel had warned that if the Allies were not stopped at the water's edge during the first 24 hours of battle, the war would be lost. Before this day is over, the Allies will plunge 10 miles inland. They will capture and hold a score of villages and small towns in Normandy. For the oppressed people of Europe, D-Day, the 6th of June, marks the beginning of their liberation.
So sorry about that silence. Basically, I'm working today, so I got a call from somebody who had a client, so I had to take that call as I was rewinding. So anyhow, so this next film is kind of interesting. Like I said, I got this from a local university, and they had a film program, and they were basically going to throw these films out, and so there were some interesting things in there. Um, oh yeah, trivia question. Mel Stewart. What's the most famous film that Mel Stewart did? Um, Put it in the comments. I actually met him. He was awesome. He was really cool before he passed away. Met him at a film festival. Think about Mel Stewart. Did a bunch of documentaries. Um, I got him to sign my copy of China Roots of Madness. Anyways, Mel Stewart. This next film, student film. I don't even think it's edited. I think this is raw footage. It might be a work print. We'll see if there's like little marks that say so. There's no sound, so we'll kill the sound. But it's called The 6th of June, and I've always wanted to watch it, and it seems like today's the day. So enjoy. Wow. So there it was, June of 6th, or 6th of June. Um, it looks like the clapboard. I want to say it was shot in April, but the calendar that's in there is June 6th, 1956, and I have no idea what this film is about. Absolutely no idea. So it's a student film. It was obviously not edited because you see the clapboards and you see the different takes. There's no sound. Sound was usually recorded separately on magnetic tape and then married at some point before they would strike a print. But I got nothing on this. I don't know anything about it. You could look probably at the clapboard and see a director's name, but this is a student, so we don't know where this went. Yeah. So sometimes the films at AV Geeks are not finished pieces. They're kind of in some sort of state of progress, and I don't know what happened with this. This might have just been a shooting exercise too. If it was a film school, they might have said like, all right, everybody's going to set up a shot and then shoot it. That's possible too. But or this could have been like a graduate project, or it could have been like a project for senior year. Who knows? But there it is. And before that was a D-Day film that was made by David Walper, which was then it was shown on television, and it was directed by Mel Stewart. So Mel Stewart, I kind of put it out there. Nobody responded. What did Mel Stewart direct? Well, one thing he directed this awesome, besides a bunch of David Walper documentaries, he did some other things for David Walper. He did a great documentary. He might have done this on his own, actually, called Wattstack, which was documenting this concert that was filmed after the Watts riots, featuring a lot of Stax Records, soul performers. Phenomenal film. Really, really great. Features a very young Richard Pryor, Ted Lange, the bartender from Love Boat's in it. And the music performances are great. There's a very young Jesse Jackson in there as well. So I recommend seeing that if you haven't seen it. But the other thing that Mel Stewart did is he's probably most famous for, or infamous for, was he was the director of Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. David Walper was hired by Quaker Oats, who had just bought the rights to the name Willy Wonka, and they were going to introduce a line of chocolate bars, and they were going to capitalize on the Willy Wonka name. And so they were given a budget, and they shot this film. It was essentially a big commercial for these chocolate bars which came out, which when the film came out, it was so weird that people were just like, whoa, this is really strange. They're being very mean to kids. Everybody's behaving poorly. Like, they didn't like it. And then when the chocolate bars were sold, there was actually a formulation problem with the wax, so all of them melted, and they just didn't sell well. So it just kind of tanked until it started going to syndication on television and being shown all the time. And our generation, the Generation Xers probably, thought that this was awesome. And it started getting legs and grew a cult following, and now it's a phenomenon. And like I said, I met Mel Stewart, and I got him to sign one of my films that he had made, China Roots of Madness, which is a film about the Cultural Revolution in China and then the history that led up to it. And he signed it, and he said, and I told him what I did. He's like, well, you're doing the Lord's work. He didn't say those words, but he said, you're doing great work. Yes, we got to get all these films onto video because they're all deteriorating. And I was like, well, the problem is that video is also deteriorating, so we're kind of stuck. But he didn't want to hear that. But anyways, he was a very kind person, and I got to be a little bit of a fanboy, which is rare in my field. Anyways, thanks so much for tuning in. I know that last film was weird. maybe you were sitting there eating a bologna sandwich while you were watching it, or porridge, or I don't know what you have for lunch. Um, a smart meal or something. I don't know. Anyways, I guarantee that future films will be more interesting. But come on, it was the 6th of June. That's the name of it, and I wanted to watch it, and there wouldn't be another time to watch it in my mind. So I didn't want to wait a year. So thanks for indulging me on that. Hopefully we'll be back next Friday. I have to look at my calendar, but we'll try to do it. It will be very impromptu. I'll try to get better about scheduling it so that it's roughly kind of between lunchtime, Eastern Standard and Central Standard Time, somewhere in there, and we'll do it like roughly an hour or so. But, well, I don't know. We'll see. Again, if you like AV Geeks, donate on Patreon. Thanks so much. Have a good weekend. We will see you soon.